Shalom. So I have GrimGriz on the channel because Grim found this video and he asked me about it, and I spat a word salad at him, and he decided he wanted to ask me about the word salad.
Yeah,
So
so,
yeah.
I guess we can just run the clip bit. I have two. One is about the Cathars, and then the other one is the part I actually care about. So let's just jump to the part I actually care about. We'll
Okay.
do the clip, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
So this is the spiritual side of that. When you look at the Cathar side of it, it almost starts to make a little more sense, because if this reality was purely just created by one loving God, the loving God I know is hell-bent on ending the suffering of persons and children here. Absolutely, undeniably just set on ending that suffering. But when I go out in nature, and that includes dogs, I've had God guide me to help dogs very often, very, very often. I've had prayers answered around them, etc. When you go out into nature and you watch a baby antelope, for example, being eaten from the back end up by a baboon, ripping pieces off with its hand. It's alive right up to the very end, and it's a baby. And it's gruesome, and it's vile, and it's horrible. And as you look at it, you say, how can the loving God I know want that? How can that be part of his creation? How can he participate in this? And when you get to those very impossible to answer questions about God, leaning towards the Cathar idea actually gives a much more comfortable state of being, in all honesty, because you have this beautiful loving God who is guiding us, and you reach that God by being in a light state. Anyone who says they have sought God without fasting, you haven't sought God. Every spiritual teacher told you to fast, and I don't mean just eating one meal. I've ate one meal a day since I was 27 years old, and I'm now 36 in a few weeks. I've always ate one meal a day, because if I don't, I feel heavy. Even when I was running, I was exactly the same. Fasting is cutting calories. It really is cutting calories. You can do it on juice, reducing calories as well, of course. But what it does is it starts disconnecting you from your flesh. And when it starts disconnecting you from your flesh, it allows you to elevate your vibration. And just as God is on a FM signal, there are flies here, then this world is on an AM. You can't keep operating in the AM signal of, if you're using a radio, I hope you understand what I mean. You can't keep operating in the AM and expect to hear FM. You've got to turn up the dial. You've got to do something. And what you have to do is elevate your vibration, your consciousness, your frequency to be able to speak to that true God. And when you see people who are extremely gluttonous, etc., they are more, in my experience, prone to feeling in the lower vibrations, more prone to anger, more prone to depression, and so on, because there is a heaviness overcoming them. It's not always the case, but it is very often the case here in my life.
It was in there somewhere, the part I wanted to talk about. I think about like if you haven't fasted and you haven't sought God bit is really the part that I wanted to get the reactions from people who I know as what you call it?
Being really fat.
No, of a spiritual mindset, at least on the internet. You know, they're concerned with spiritual and religious things. And this guy is coming around saying, if you don't fast, you haven't really sought. So I wanted the response from those that I know of, you know, in the Vanderclay Discord sphere of influence, how that thought landed. And that's why I came to you.
Okay, so I mean, I can't speak against fasting because fasting, he's right, it's a spiritual practice that pretty much, I mean, I believe everybody, I don't know that there are, I mean, I guess maybe there might have been Bacchians and Epicureans and hedonists who might have been opposed to fasting. I know Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism all include fasting. I mean, he touches upon a lot of stuff, and that's why I kind of threw a word salad at you, because it really, I mean,
because he's all over the place too. Yeah.
it's not just all over the place. He seems to be taking a very specific view, like so, I mean, there's a lot of people, especially nowadays, who have zero training in theology, right? And we have so little background in theology, right? How many people have even taken a high school course, just like the basic things, right? Theology 101, religion 101. Like, almost nobody takes any classes in it. And like, I keep on saying this, but like, when Sam Harris was talking to Jordan Peterson, I was like, wow, this guy has no education whatsoever in philosophy. And then somebody pointed out to me that he got his bachelor's degree with a major in philosophy. And I was like on the floor. It's like, how do you get a bachelor's degree in philosophy without knowing like the most simple things? And I sent you to that video that I sent, and it was like Bart Ehrman, right? One of the smartest guys, most educated former Christians I've ever listened to. And some of the questions he acted like were, yeah. And then I discovered, I taught a class on theodicy, and and that's what moved him away from religion, was finally asking this question of theodicy. And I'm like, you have a PhD in New Testament studies, and you were a pastor, and you went to Moody Bible College, and the first time you thought about theodicy is when you taught a course on it. Like,
okay,
yeah.
Let me, because like people might watch this because they heard I was gonna be here. Like the word theodicy looks a lot like theo and idiocy crammed together. But what does it even mean?
Okay, so the word theodicy is the technical term for the problem of evil. Okay, so you have a good God, and you see evil, and you say, well, how does that work, right?
So what's up with evil means theodicy.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The problem of evil. So like, if God created the world, and God rules the world, and we look around and we see little baby animals being tortured to death, or baby humans being tortured to death, right? So like Camus in The Plague talks about children with little babies with plague, right? And Dostoevsky in Brothers Karamazov, right? The main thing about it is how does God let children suffer, right? And it's one of the biggest questions. Like, so
we could just think of at this point, we could look at our own lives as the worst thing we've ever witnessed and say, what's up with that?
I'll do you one better. Look at the cross. Look at the cross. Innocent man, like, dying, right? This is the cross, right? This is the symbol of Christianity. A good, innocent man, which at least some Christians believe is God, right? And he's suffering, right? This is the image of the crucifix, right?
Because of the workings of the Pharisees, right?
Because well, exactly. Like, how does this happen, right? How does God suffer? How does God create suffering? Like, this is the core of the religious struggle, right? And different people phrase it in different ways, but like, so the book of Job may be actually older than the book of Genesis, right? It might be the oldest book in the Bible. And the whole story of it is there's a good guy, he does nothing wrong, and a bunch of terrible things happen to him. And three of his friends come and say, no, you must have done something wrong, right? Because we believe in God, so you must be a bad person. And he's like, no, I'm not a bad person. And they're like, yeah, you must be a bad person. And
He's like, you guys haven't even studied Theodicy, man. God's making bets up there.
and then his wife tells him to just curse God and die. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then God comes on the scene and he tells them all to shut up.
He's like, I'm going to give him a new wife that's even better than you, Maggie.
Right? And God like reads his friends the riot act, and then reads Job the riot act, and says, I do it because I do it, and you have no idea, and you're not going to get it. And that's just how this is the world, this is the suffering, right? And that is the concept of the Messiah, right? The Messiah is when knowledge covers the earth with the same way that waters cover, right? Like water, it will wash over us, and then we'll finally be able to see and understand why all this stuff happened. But like now, we just suffer, right? The psalm that always comes to my mind is halach yalachu bacho. He is walking back and forth crying, and nose meshech hazara, during the time of the planting, bo yavo verina, he will come back with joy, nose alumotav, carrying his sheaves, right? So this is the time of the planting where we walk back and forth and we're sowing seeds and we're crying because we're suffering and we don't understand and it's horrible. And the faith that we have is that one day we will come back and malis chok pinu, our mouths will be filled with joy, right? And we'll have the sheaves, we'll understand what all those things we planted. And honestly, I mean, in our lives, I think it's a lot easier to see than it was in previous generations. You know, my grandmother was born on the rivers of Babylon, right? And she told me all she did when she was a kid, like this was her whole life. She was a young woman in rural, like Kurdistan. Baghdad. What?
You're talking to Americans, just say Baghdad. It's close enough.
Well, okay, but she was out in the middle of nowhere, and she told me like all they would do all day was cook and clean and take things down to the river to wash. Like she would spend the whole day dragging clothes that she had woven herself to the river and beating them on a rock to wash them, or like taking dishes to the river to like try to wash them. And she told me when she finally moved to a city where there was hot water, and like you would go into the kitchen and you would turn on hot water and wash the dishes right there, right? And it was like it was like her whole life had completely changed for her, right?
I know she didn't get to hang out with her washerwomen friends and gossip anymore. She had to stay locked away in a home all by herself washing dishes. It's terrible.
Well, she wasn't all by herself, but like the washing dishes became so much easier. She told me she kind of felt like it was miraculous. Like it was like that her whole life had completely changed, right? And for her, like after having experienced that, it had really changed. But for us, like we think it's we lose our minds if the dishwasher breaks, right?
Right, but like it's not even the theodicy that I wanted the reaction to. It's the like, I mean, we'll sit here and we'll talk about what this guy says and like what research that guy has done, but like who's actually seeking? Because like people get to call themselves Christians. And like I don't know, you don't. I try to get the Christian response and I end up talking to you, but it's like
I don't trust anybody
I
who's
didn't know
willing to call
fasting was
themselves a
a
Christian.
part of Christianity
Well,
until until I found this dude on the internet. I didn't associate fasting with Christianity at all, or like barely even with Judaism.
really?
Like I know that Muslims fast, you know, so like that's the part that sticks to me is like all I remember of Christianity and fasting is like when you fast, don't make a big deal about the fact you're fasting. So like that explains why nobody talks about it. But this guy also goes on to say like the part how he's talking about the spirit and the matter and like denying your bestial nature gets you more in tune like a radio station with the spiritual. And like his essential thing ultimately is that our nervous system and our spinal column is like an antenna to God, and if we clean it, we hear God better. And like he goes on to say like things like there's this part where Jacob sees the face of God and he calls the place Peniel. Like he says that's the part in our brain that we're talking about. And it's those kind of outrageous claims I really want some like the people that study religious stuff to like talk to me about. And
Okay,
like
so the problem is he's a neo-gnostic, and Gnosticism is a very, very old heresy, and it's a problem
yeah, the
because
start of the video is like he's saying it was the 700th anniversary of when the church slaughtered the Cathars. So, and
okay,
that kind of thing. See, this is the ballpark I wanted to talk, and not why is evil. I know why is evil. It's in here.
um, well, okay. I mean, it is partially in here, although I think he makes the mistake of, and it is a Gnostic mistake. Well, some Gnostics make of believing that evil is either just in here or it's just part of the world. And it's like, no, there's evil in the world and there's also evil here. And sometimes nature does horrible things, and sometimes we do horrible things.
Horror
Um,
and evil are two different things. I got
mm,
here. Since you're gonna put me on your channel, let me go ahead and throw this bit out there.
please.
You know that part in Genesis when it's like, hey, that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
And then they eat the fruit anyway.
Mm,
Like what if it's an amnesia fruit? What if like in order to experience what good and evil truly is, you have to be severed from the experience of God. Like you don't get to feel his presence constantly, knowing that you're part of a beautiful, loving universe anymore. You have to forget that. And maybe that's what knowing good and evil is all about. But that's my I don't know if is that neo-gnostic nonsense? Because that's
it's
my
not
personal nonsense.
nonsense. It's 100% not nonsense. You are talking. You are speaking ancient. I mean, these are ancient ideas. You. The fact that you have had to reinvent the wheel kind of is part of what saddens me, is
Mhm.
because there
That's what I
are.
remember of you, actually, is like when the thought of you pops up in my head,
Mhm.
that part where you were I don't know when I saw it, right? But there was this one part where you were exasperatingly saying, like, my people suffer from lack of knowledge or whatever. You were quoting that line. And like it's like the chunk, the like the binder on the book of that Jacob guy. When I go to
Really?
my mental library, it's like, my people for the lack of knowledge. But go ahead, sorry.
Okay, I'm not sure what exactly you're talking about, but okay. No, I mean seriously, it's you're struggling with ancient questions that people have been struggling with for thousands of years. There's been more ink spilled on these ideas, right? There are more books written on these things than you could possibly read in one lifetime. And there are lots and lots of different answers, right? And I think I said this to you earlier as well. Like, I don't judge people on which of the answers they find like a good answer, because I don't think there is one perfectly good answer that will answer it for everyone. And B, I think struggling with these questions, like that's what the word Israel means, right? To struggle with God. And this is the wrestling with God, right? It's like, God, what are you doing, right? What is this? Why am I here? Why is the world the way it is? What am I supposed to be doing here, right? And anybody who pretends like they have simple solutions is either a simpleton or a charlatan. Most likely the latter. Most likely the latter. Although there are also a lot of simpletons around. And a thinking person, like, yeah, struggles with this stuff, and like anybody who tells me that they have the answer, I just think they're an idiot.
Well, it's like with this thing, the
Odyssey. Yeah.
the Odyssey thing. It's like I am exposed to what I would call Christian YouTubers, and
Okay.
I don't even know where they stand on this stuff. Like, I first learned of Gnosticism from Terence McKenna saying those idiots didn't breed because they thought being in the flesh was a bad place. I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty bad place. I see your point, but, and then, he just makes fun of them for dying out for not breeding. And then I hear this guy who you say is a neo-Gnostic, and so like, whoa, what are like all these, it's like, and nobody talks about what the people in India believe or the people in China have going on. And it's, I don't know, with this one in particular, since it's like tied this close to Christianity, it was weird to me that I didn't know what the thought was on fasting, on theodicy, I don't know. I watch all these Christian YouTubers, and I don't know what they think about these serious issues, and that's why I reached out about it.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't know exactly which Christian, like,
it's Pajot and Vanderklay. That's
Pajot and Vanderklay. I mean, Vanderklay, he's a Calvinist, right? So, I mean, where Calvin stands on theodicy. Good question. Honestly, I mean, yeah, part of it is that you're dealing with Protestants, right? And
I'm dealing with a whole bunch of different people saying we're Christian. That's what I'm dealing with.
Right, but almost all of them are Protestants, right? Pajot isn't a Protestant, but he kind of is. Even in his Eastern Orthodoxy, he's kind of Protestant about it. And I mean, you grew up in the United States, and the United States has always been very, very Protestant. And the problem with the Protestants and this whole revolution they had 500 years ago was they were kind of like, you know what, you people have spent way too much time thinking about all this stuff, and you've come up with a bunch of stuff, and it's garbage, and they wholesale threw everything out, right?
The famous
And
baby with the bathwater thing.
yeah,
And
and
this time it was baby Jesus.
there definitely was a lot of bathwater there. And I there's still bathwater I kind of wish they would throw out, kind of like the Trinity, for example. But and there are people who are trying to throw that out too. Yay. But they left behind a lot of things that people have been struggling with for thousands of years, right? And so you have this concept of sola scriptura. Have you heard of sola scriptura?
I've heard people say it, but I don't have it tied to anything in my head.
Okay, so supposedly Protestantism has 5 solae, which means 5 only. And one of them, and the most prominent one, is sola scriptura, meaning only the Bible, right? That our authority, the only infallible authority, is the Bible itself and nothing outside the Bible. Okay.
And that hinges on the Council of Nicaea saying what goes in and what doesn't.
So that's the reason why sola scriptura is self-refuting and silly, right? Because it makes no sense, and the Catholics just like sit there and laugh at you because they're right. Because you can't say sola scriptura until you've decided what the scriptura is, and it's like, so what's scriptura, right?
Well, certainly not that Gospel of Thomas, that doubting son of a.
I read the Doubting Thomas. I read the Gospel of Thomas since I last spoke to you, and I actually think that's the most genuine gospel I've read yet, except for the last
That's my problem as well, sir. I have a similar issue. That and that I heard it from an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, the first run.
The except for the last line, like the last line is just silly, but and most people believe it was added later. The rest of it seems like I actually think if the Christians were to get rid of the Gospel of John and put Gospel of Thomas instead, I would be much happier.
Well, I think that that's a clip, and we run that to your friends, and we'll have a lot of conversation about that one.
But the funny thing is actually that John is actually considered the most Gnostic, and I would say is the most Gnostic of the Gospels. And the Gospel of Thomas, because it was found at Nag Hammadi with a bunch of Gnostic stuff, I don't think it is Gnostic itself, but it gets kind of thrown out as like, oh, that's a Gnostic gospel, we don't care. And I don't think it is very Gnostic at all. And have you heard of the Gospel of Judas?
Heard of, but not read. Same with Magdalene.
So it was actually only found recently. I mean, it's not that old. It's from around the year 300-400, maybe even 500. But that is the most Gnostic of all the Gospels, the Gospel of Judas. And it's I think you would find it interesting. I
guarantee you I'd find it interesting. I'm afraid I might like it a lot, which, I'm in enough trouble as it is. Have there been any developments on the Paul front? Because you're the one I have watching that for me.
What do you mean? Which
where
Paul
he was the son of that one fella?
Oh, so Eisenman? Yeah, the thing with Eisenman is he seems to actually been, I mean, the problem with him is he rants so much. I've been trying to listen to his lectures, and like I've listened to hours and hours and hours, and like he spends more time repeating absolutely irrelevant things about like his own life and stuff. He's one of those professors you're just sitting there and like can you go back to the subject, please? Yeah. But he has some really interesting ideas as well. And yeah, his ideas have kind of been percolating. but apparently his book is as rambly and ranting as his lectures are. So I'm not going to pick up and his books are thousands of pages long. And it takes him forever. So there are people who are reading him. And of course, the stuff he's saying is very offensive to Christians. But he has this tendency to see things like every once in a while I'm listening to him, after hours and hours of listening to like him rambling, he'll say something and then I look at him like, wow, that's something, right? So
occasional gems.
Yeah. Nassim Taleb is like
people
that.
People say that about me. So I hear you saying it about him, and I'm already liking the guy.
You occasional gems? No, I think you have a very sharp mind. No, I don't think you ramble. No, you have a very sharp mind.
Yeah, but a lot of it's nonsense. So occasionally.
Well, okay, so.
But no, like his main theory is that like we can historically validate Paul.
Well, we can. Paul is the most historically. I mean, we know Paul.
But I thought it was a big revelation that who he was adopted by some dude.
Oh, so So his thing with Paul is that Paul was actually part of Herod's family.
Ooh, that's like juicy. I would watch a movie about that, Paul.
Right. And apparently, I mean, I never saw it, but apparently the Last Temptation of Christ kind of goes down that line of Paul kind of hijacking Christianity from Jesus. I didn't see that movie. I don't know if you did.
No, it was like, you'll go to hell if you watch that. I was like, I'm already risking it, so I'll just pass.
Yeah,
I didn't watch the Mel Gibson one either, though, so it's balanced.
I didn't watch the Mel Gibson one because I could tell Mel Gibson was sprinkling all his anti-Semitism in there. It
adds a little spice.
the Last Temptation of Christ, I didn't watch because when it came out, it just seemed like it was there to piss off the Catholics, and I see no reason to piss off the Catholics for no good reason. I mean, I'll piss them off for good reason, but like not just to piss them off.
Yeah, if you troll for justice or troll for noble reasons, not just troll to troll. Yeah.
But so I mean, Paul, I'm just waiting for new things to be found. I really think there's going to be some discoveries. I want the Gospel of the Hebrews. Like, I'm waiting for the Gospel of the Hebrews to be found. And I'm
waiting for the third temple to be built, because I guess I've become an accelerationist at this point. So let's just do it already. Let's go.
So have I told you about my ideas about the third temple? You're the one who suggested to me that like all the UFO stuff might be a psyop. I'm not convinced.
Dude, they had hologram projectors brought into Temple Mount for that UFO in 2001 or whatever.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Temple Mount UFO. Merry Christmas. Let's talk again in a couple of weeks.
I have never heard of this, but like the stuff going on with UFOs, like there's a lot of information coming out that's like, I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is not junk. And I used to listen to Art Bell. Like, Art Bell is fun listening, but it's all junk, right? And like anytime you look into it, there's nothing there. But this is real stuff, and it like real stuff is coming out about like. Did you watch Lex Friedman's interview with Commander Fravor?
No, I don't watch much anything anymore. I've fallen back into Minecraft.
I would listen to it. It's about 2 hours long, but I found it very convincing. And I just read this book Avi Loeb wrote, and he's an astrophysicist from Harvard, about extraterrestrials and Umau, which is it's a Hawaiian name. So
No,
It's
I just because that's a song lyric that people have chanted.
Umau Umau. Huh. It's the name of the first interstellar object to be detected in our solar system. And
Oh wait, no, I think I'm mapping it to do run run. I do I do run run. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
you, your brain makes these connections. I love sometimes. Like last time we were talking, like you would pull out snippets. Like you have a really sharp mind. You do.
It's something. It's not configured in the usual fashion. I can tell you that.
Well, yeah. I mean, but there's something good about that. I like I think there's a lot of stuff that you bring up which like I look into and it's like no, this is garbage. But there's a lot of stuff you reject, which is like most people are taking it seriously, and you're looking at it and you're like, this is bullshit. And I look at it and I'm like, he's right, it is bullshit. And just being able to tell the difference between like being able to reject anything, like so many people really are sheeple. They have no capacity to look at something and say, no, this is bullshit.
All right. Let me throw this out there. Like you said, a lot of people are sheeple.
People, yeah.
If you there's Daniel Schmachtenberger, we talked about, you don't like him a lot.
Yes.
So there's this dude who does the podcast is called Modern Wisdom now. But he had Schmachtenberger on. That was the first time I ever saw him.
Okay.
And it was after he had gone on the Portal.
Okay.
And I'm assuming talked to like the Portal's financier. And he goes on this guy's show, and this guy is like from the Real World something Europe, like an England version of the Real World something. And now he's a podcaster. And Schmachtenberger goes on there and he says, I talked to this dude, and this dude said there's like, powerful financier guy, and dude says there's food people and not food people, and there's predator people and prey people, and if you're a prey human, and that's sheeple. But it's like homeboy in the Joker costume from the clip is talking about. It's like if you live in the flesh too much, that's the animal you running your life.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, there's a reason why Gnosticism is a perennial heresy, right?
What does the word Gnosticism mean to you? Like when you say like that.
So the word gnosis, right, is Greek. It means knowledge. Okay, and well, the word Gnosticism gets thrown around as a pejorative about a lot. So people will use it kind of like just as anything they don't like. But truly, Gnosticism is the idea that there is some secret knowledge that if you have it, it changes the world completely, right? That the world we see is in a way illusory, right? And if you are able to, with this super secret knowledge, right, with this gnosis, you are able to see through the world to the deeper truth beyond it. Okay?
Interesting.
And so there's.
And so what's the objection to that?
The objection to that is that so part of that is a division between the spiritual and the material, right? There's a dichotomy between the spiritual and the material, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Gnosticism is founded on the idea that the material is evil and we want to escape it into the spiritual, right? And that's in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam is rejected because we believe that God created the material, and the material is, while it may have evil as a part of it, it is ultimately, not essentially, but ultimately good. Okay? So the idea of the kingdom, right? The Messiah, the coming, right? We're going to have a physical, a material kingdom, which is going to be completely good, right?
Okay.
So we reject this Gnostic idea that the material is evil, and we are trying to, because honestly, like if you're a real Gnostic, you just kill yourself.
Well, that's why I never went atheist, for the record. The first part, before you talked about the material and spiritual division of that, of gnosis, that sounds like being filled with the Holy Spirit to me.
So I mean, there were
Like you say gnosis is a secret knowledge that lets you see the world for what it really is, or the
see
deeper
through
meaning.
the world.
See through the world to
through
the
the
deeper
world.
meaning.
Yes.
And to me, like when I was like praying in a Pentecostal church up the road, and like the lady I talked to all the time started speaking in tongues behind me in prayer, she was seeing through the world to a deeper meaning to me. So I, like, with the rejection of gnosis as Gnostics as wrong, that all like the major religions are doing, that they're not saying that being filled with the Holy Spirit and gnosis are the same thing, are they?
No. So what the major religions, Abrahamic religions, monotheistic religions are Neoplatonic. Okay, so it's called Neoplatonism because this guy named Plotinus, that's how he explained Plato, but honestly, his ideas weren't really in Plato himself. So it's called Neoplatonism, but it comes from this guy named Plotinus. And that's the video, Sam and Vervaeke, right? Sam's video on Vervaeke, that's one of the best videos about Neoplatonism. And so the belief that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all espouse is that, as opposed to the Gnostic belief, where the spiritual is opposed to the material, and this gnosis allows you to escape from the physical into the spiritual, the Neoplatonic idea is that the goal is actually to bring the spiritual into the physical, to manifest the spiritual in the physical, right? And to create a kingdom for God, right? In which this physical world starts mirroring the kingdom of God in heaven, right? And brings all of that down into this world.
That
right?
whole on earth as it is in heaven bit.
Exactly. Yes.
And the Gnostics are like, screw this place, it's terrible.
Exactly. So, like, we were talking on the Vervaeke, on the PVK thing about where fasting goes too far, and somebody linked to this thing where Buddhists will meditate and fast until they die, and that's considered, like, there are these mummies of people who like fasted so much that they self-mummify and they just, die.
That's the prettiest form of suicide I've ever heard of.
I think it's pretty ugly, but so that is the opposite of the Neoplatonic idea, right? To escape into the spiritual from the material is the opposite of the Neoplatonic idea, which is to change this world, right? To change the physical and make it like the good that God intended it to be.
Well, I think it's terribly presumptuous to assume God's intention ever, but I like that clarification. I appreciate it very much.
Well, that's why we have the word of God, right? So that you're not presuming it, so that it is revealed to you.
That's another show.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for doing this recording, and
Sure.
I think this was good. I think people will get something, at least questions out of it, and something to think about. So I think we did good.
I hope so. I hope so.
All right.
You're
Thanks,
you're
Jacob.
you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, I suspect so. I suspect we'll do this again sometime.
Okay,
Thanks.
good.
Wait, just stop recording. We said goodbye. That's all right.